Breaking news. A Bitcoin scaling agreement has been reached. But has an agreement really been reached? And what have we reached, if anything at all? Meanwhile, a former PayPal executive has predicted that we'll see a single Bitcoin reach $1 million within the next 10 years. Let's discuss. Hey everybody, I'm Gary Palmer Jr., you're you. Together, welcome to Minting Coins. So there were so many other things that I had planned on talking about today and had some other videos to present some information. I know I've been getting a lot of questions about how to resolve our ENS domain name so people can receive payment to those addresses. But I wanted to do this video before I do those videos just because we have this breaking news for months and months and for years and what has seemed to be decades of time, but not actually. We've had this scaling debate with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin transactions, as more people have been learning about Bitcoin and using Bitcoin for transactions or simply sending Bitcoin to their private wallets to store their wealth long term, people have been noticing large Bitcoin transactions or long delays in how long it takes for our Bitcoin transactions to receive confirmations as being received and processed on the blockchain. And so we have solutions to fix this, but we have multiple competing solutions. And the issue or opportunity with Bitcoin and blockchain technology when it's open and decentralized is that we need consensus and that we need everyone to be on the same page. And if everyone isn't on the same page, then we can't change the rules. So with the ideas and the strategy of direction of the code and how we scale Bitcoin, how we make Bitcoin stronger, better, faster, we have competing camps, what people want to do in that direction. And with that, there's been a lot of disagreement between those two camps, and because there's been so much disagreement between those two camps, we've had no resolution to this problem. Because we've had no resolution, we've seen a lot of altcoins come in and really take a lot of space and a lot of market share away from Bitcoin simply because these other alternative currencies, alternative digital assets are filling the need for quick, fast transactions where people are looking to use digital cash and use cryptocurrency as a digital cash for these small payments. So what we're finding out today is that there's been another breakthrough, a new agreement, and this new agreement, if everyone is actually on the same page and Bitcoin is enhanced and upgraded to handle these fast transactions, everyone is expecting a massive surge in the price of Bitcoin. But what I want to know is that really the full story? And what is the information that we're not receiving in all of these articles that are coming out in all of the Bitcoin magazines and all the mainstream magazines online or websites online that are talking about this? What aren't they letting us know? Because this is going to have a huge influence with the value of Bitcoin increasing as this would create additional demand for Bitcoin for people to make these microtransactions. And what we're seeing in the news today as well, coming out of Consensus 2017 in a separate event, is that we see a former executive of PayPal predicting that we're going to see a single Bitcoin reach over $1 million within 10 years, not within 15 or 20 or 25. He's saying within 10 years. And this is after we had the Snapchat investor a few months ago, maybe a few weeks ago even, predict $500,000 Bitcoin within the next 15 years. So we definitely see the predictions of the values of Bitcoin exponentially increasing from very intelligent, very successful, very smart people with a track record of success. And so with that, I want to go over just what is being said, some of the information in the market, and for you and I to talk about that. And so with that, let's talk about it and let's discuss. So starting off over in the coinmarketcap.com, just taking a quick look at where we are with the market, we see Bitcoin, I mean, this is just amazing, $2,372. It's just shooting up, and the whole market is going crazy. I think that this has a ton to do with all the energy and excitement coming out of the Consensus 2017 conference that's been going on, and all of the additional conferences that have been going on all weekend long. There's a lot of excitement coming out of New York, and a lot of big names, big companies that are working on a lot of new technology to disrupt a lot of industries and way of life. With that, it's creating a lot of demand for Bitcoin, for Ethereum, and all of these other cryptocurrencies and tokens, as they're one way or another, most of them are actually interconnected, or are simply being lifted in value, because as the tide rises, then most of the ships with a strong business plan is going to be lifted with that. One note I'll just mention with that is that some people ask, are we in a bubble? And when you see the dramatic increases in prices that we're seeing, double digits across the board for so many coins day after day, it definitely feels like a bubble. And so, you definitely want to have a lot of caution. And no matter how high this goes, personally, I'm absolutely expecting some sort of crash, some sort of drawback, and I think everybody is. Either the SEC information is going to be coming out. I'll be reporting on that when that information does get released, and more than likely there's a 9.5, I'd say 95 to 99.9% chance that they're going to deny that, and then we'll see the price in Bitcoin drop, and some of these alternative coins drop as well. But the market is definitely going in one direction, and long term, as we go up and as we go down and as we go up, the long term projection, as I see it and a lot of other folks see it, is definitely exponentially in the upward direction. Although this is not financial advice, and you really need to make your own decisions and what's best for you and your family. So real quick, just popping in, looking at the ENS system, I just want to let you guys know that 35% of the ENS domain names have been released. So if you want your own decentralized ENS domain name for the Ethereum, from the Ethereum name service that runs on the Ethereum blockchain, then we still have 65% of the domain names that haven't been released. So you still have huge opportunities waiting for you over for an ENS domain. So going over the breaking news, where the article here at CryptoCoinNews.com is that Bitcoin miners reach a scaling agreement for SegWit update, plus a 2 megabit block size increase. So the two different camps that we were talking about earlier, on one hand, essentially we have a SegWit camp that wants to take this code upgrade called SegWit that has lots of what would be described as lots of awesome fixes, enhancements, upgrades, and patches, just to make Bitcoin faster and more secure, and just a stronger coin all around, allowing for these microtransactions. And then, so that's the SegWit camp. And then there's the other camp, which essentially just wants to make fewer more minor changes, but the bulk of what they're looking to do is to simply increase the block size, because the total block size, without getting too technical here, and these block sizes that are mined and connected to each other, the size of the data in these blocks can only be 1 megabyte with Bitcoin, and so they want to increase that to much higher than just 2 megabytes. But the compromise, according to what's going on from today's news, is that they'll increase it to 2 megabytes. And we're going to talk about why I think increasing the block size may be a bad idea. So what we see here is that from this agreement, a total of 56 companies that represent 83.28% of Bitcoin's hashing power have reached a consensus. And so I sort of have this in red and throw up some air quotes about consensus, because if it's 83.28% of all the network hashing power for Bitcoin, is it really a consensus if we're missing over 15% of the voices and over 15% of the users that make up 100% of Bitcoin? For me, unless it's between 95 and 100%, that isn't a consensus, because people are coming to an agreement while leaving the voices and opinion of, more than 1.5 people out of 10 out of the vote. So if there's more than one person that doesn't have their voice being heard, then does this truly represent all the people who have a stake in Bitcoin? And I think the answer to that question is no. And so the agreement is to deploy is for SegWit to be deployed, and then at the same time, after a certain period of time, with a threshold and a signaling for then a 2 megabyte hard fork to then happen within 6 months. And so we have soft forking, we have hard forking, and I'm not going to go into the details of that. What I want you guys to just know is that when we hear this talk about forking, the forking just means software upgrade. So when you upgrade software in your computer, in a decentralized system, when some people upgrade the software in one direction and other people choose not to upgrade their software in that direction, then there's a soft fork in what version of the software each person is running. And so the word fork just means software upgrade, and that's what the fork means. But how we fork and what the implications of the software is going to do for the network affects us. And what I want to leave you with, and just leave you to think about, is that essentially when we increase the block size, then we're concentrating power of the companies that are able to hash Bitcoin, that are able to mine Bitcoin. And so I know that this might be boring, but the bigger the blocks, the fewer the companies that are going to be able to process these massive transactions. And if there's fewer companies and fewer people and fewer nodes and fewer points of being able to get into Bitcoin and being able to make Bitcoin profitable, because anyone can mine Bitcoin, but it's not going to be profitable for the users unless they truly have the power to win the Bitcoin lottery for that block to get allotted to them. And so when we're increasing the block size, we're decreasing the number of we're making the fewer players more powerful. And just to show you what is saying, what some people are saying in Twitter, there's this one gentleman here, Henry Brad, from the co-founder and CEO of this one company in the Bitcoin and blockchain space, where he's saying his opinion on this is that what we're seeing is a removal of the Bitcoin cyberpunk roots. So the Bitcoin cyberpunk roots are people who believe in decentralization and freedom of the information for all the people in the world to have a sort of equal say and equal stake in Bitcoin. And then so he's saying we're seeing the removal of the Bitcoin cyberpunk roots and the insertion of an industrial oligopoly to control all of Bitcoin development. And so this is just restating what I'm bringing up, which is that as we increase the block size, what Henry's opinion is here is that we're making Bitcoin more centralized, so fewer people, fewer companies have more power to control the direction and development of Bitcoin, which isn't a great thing for Bitcoin. And it'll be really interesting to see how this progresses. No matter how this does progress, I think that overall the value of Bitcoin will continue to exist. It's just going to be something that is going to be critical for us to keep an eye on. And it's not just with Bitcoin, but this is across all the cryptocurrencies, because as this may create fewer companies with more power over Bitcoin, we see similar things happening with Ethereum. So when we talked about Consensus 2017 a couple times, and when we look at who's attending and what's going on at Consensus, we see some major names, we see some major investors, we see some major enterprise level companies, and from several different industries and industry startups. We see companies from names like Bloomberg and Capital One, Citi and CME Group, IBM and Microsoft, NASDAQ and S&P, Procter and Gamble, Thomson Reuters, Vanguard, Western Union. We're talking the biggest, most major national, multinational companies in the world, ranging from banks and investment banks to major product, consumer products, all sorts of industries that originally the cyberpunks and Bitcoin was, sort of fighting against, right, when they were fighting against the system or just building up a new technology. And looking at, some of these folks, again, just all sorts of people from all different sorts of banks, Central Bank of Barbados, Deutsche Bank, the World Bank, Cross River Bank, just the list goes on and on. Citi Ventures, CME Ventures, Union Square Ventures. There's just all sorts of companies that are here. And then for those that don't know, with Ethereum is going to be building Zcash into the roadmap of Ethereum. And so we see JPMorgan tapping Zcash to add security to their blockchain platform. And so the developers of Zcash, their core team, have partnered with JPMorgan, a very large bank that most people are familiar with that bank. And they're apparently leading the way, JPMorgan is leading the way for applications of distributed ledger technology in global finance. And so JPMorgan is leveraging global finance, is leveraging Ethereum, is leveraging Zcash technology. And this is simply an example of major corporations, major traditional finance corporations who are getting involved in Bitcoin, Ethereum, blockchain technology. And this is the corporate takeover of Bitcoin and blockchain technology. And so we see here JPMorgan is a founding member of the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, and they are able to explore how the state-of-art cryptography and privacy is going to enhance the next generation of financial services. So I don't want to come off as, saying that this is a bad thing. This is really a good thing that we're having integration of this technology inside our system. It's going to create competition. It's going to create opportunity. It's going to create new opportunities to leverage new ideas. The core of what Bitcoin is still going to exist, and it's going to be really interesting to see how these different systems are going to really progress, especially as people have different options. And I would imagine that using a JPMorgan system is just going to have more privacy restrictions and more fees and just more loopholes for people to have to jump through, versus the options and solutions that are going to be available in terms of open source, freely distributed tools and technology. And so I want people to be aware of the corporate influence and creating, centralized, taking currencies away from being decentralized and making them more centralized. These are red flags that we want to be aware of in the space, right? So if we see a lot of these red flags, if say for instance Bitcoin becomes controlled by just a few players, and then they say that in some sort of crazy scenario, years or decades down the line, that they're going to double the number of Bitcoin from 21 million to 42 million. We would want to recognize that that's inflation. If they were going to increase it even by 1 Bitcoin, that's breaking the social contract that we have with each other inside the Bitcoin space to agree that there will only be 21 million. And we want to understand that if they make that 1 Bitcoin more, if anyone was to do that without really the consensus of 100% of the community, that'd be breaking the social contract, and that users would simply use the coin that had our trust, that would back the social contract. And so we just want to be recognize these red flags while accepting the creation and adoption of this technology. Because what we're hearing is that more and more business leaders, Tim Draper, Bill Gates, Richard Branson, and now we're hearing from the Swiss-based Bitcoin wallet Zappo CEO Wences Casares, who is a former PayPal executive, who's predicting that we're going to see a massive $1 million Bitcoin within the next 10 years. And this is just a shocking number. And as we're watching the exponential rise of Bitcoin over time, it's practically doubling at this point every 6 months. And it's only going to take a couple news stories for a huge demand to take place, because there's only currently 16.3 million Bitcoins. And if there was a major news story across the world, or even America, with 350 million people, if everybody wanted 1 Bitcoin, that would be impossible. And that would instantly drive that price up to $1 million. And it's just really interesting to see this news being made not just by average people, or not just by industry insiders, but by major business leaders in a very public way, releasing this information. We're even seeing more news stories on CNBC calling it the new gold, and having dedicated features on it, people talking about it. And when they're talking about it, they're not bashing it like they once were, simply because they can't deny the incredible gains that we've been seeing. Bitcoin over 75,000% since 2011. Ethereum over 7,000% since January 2016. And meanwhile, gold simply hasn't had the return that gold bugs are looking for in comparison to what cryptocurrencies have done. And let's not talk about inflation and how that destroys wealth year after year for everyone that has cash or a bank account. So with that, it was just a lot of information, a lot to go over. This breaking news is really exciting, and the breaking news is really interesting for the investors and the speculators. When people hear this information, my guess is that it's going to drive up the price, and because people are going to expect that when the SegWit is activated, or when the scaling issue is resolved, that the demand for Bitcoin is going to increase simply because it's going to be much more usable for everyday transactions, and then more people are going to want to store that Bitcoin and hoard that Bitcoin as a store of value. Since the demand will be increasing, that value will be increasing. And since the Bitcoin is limited, the supply is only so available, and there's only so much liquidity, that the value of Bitcoin is likely going to continue to rise. Yeah, but at the same time, this agreement isn't going to get implemented for even another 6 months. So while they say there's an agreement, there's still a lot that has to happen, and we're going to have to keep an eye on that to see how these developments change, and how what actually happens is going to affect us. And when we find that information out, I'm going to bring that information to you. So with that, thanks for showing up. Thanks for sticking with me with this video. Thanks for learning about this information. Please hit that like button. Check out the notes below. Leave a comment. Let me know if you have any comments or questions about any of this information. I really want to know what you think, and I really want to help you answer your questions and learn about this space. So thank you very much. Have a great day, and I'm glad that together we are minting coins. Thank you.